1974 was a monumental year for Britain's bearers of large collars and dodgy leather jackets. Not only was disco reaching its peak, but people were also beginning to recognise a few nifty little movers with great potential reaching our shores. No, not the Jacksons. It was, of course, Volkswagen's introduction of the Golf. And this family unit, unlike the Jacksons, was to remain complete and pretty much cosmetically unenhanced for the next 20-odd years. The Vauxhall Astra was always the poor relation to the Golf, a singles act rather than an album artist. Before it even turns a wheel, there's no mistaking this is like no other Astra before. But you can see the family resemblance between this and its larger brother, the Vectra. There's a kind of solid chunkiness to it. But don't confuse this model with the more cooking versions you might see on the high street. This is the SRI 2 litre, the sports version. So we've got 16-inch 5-spoke alloys. We've got these flared side skirts and, of course, the essential tail spoiler. This, in fact, is your classic boy racer kit. Slip inside and it's absolutely typical Astra territory in here. It's pretty basic, pretty sparse. I'd love to say that it was an environmentally and ergonomically refined environment, kind of taut and with nothing extraneous, but it ain't. It's just basic in here. But once you've looked past that, notice that the materials used are pretty nice and the fit and finish is pretty good. And actually nestling away in this rather basic looking interior, there's a fair amount of kit. This is the SRI version. We've got air conditioning in here, we've got some rather tarty looking details like the white clocks and the little bits of chrome. These seats are sports seats, which is nice, but go beyond that and you have actually got to start to spend money on the bells and whistles to tart up your little teen idol. So it certainly isn't overly specced in here. Once underway, as with all sporty versions in previous incarnations of Astra, it is by no means the most refined of packages. It is 2 litre, it's 136 brake horsepower going through the front wheels, and those front wheels of course clad in pretty low profile chunky tyres. So there is plenty of grip, but there's also, as with all previous SRI versions of Astra, plenty of torque steer as well if you do apply the right boot a little too readily. And also around town where any smaller hatch is going to spend a lot of its time. It's a bit of a handful, mostly because there's a fair amount of movement on the take-up of the throttle delivery. In other words, you are left jerking backwards and forwards when you're driving around town, which makes it certainly not a car that's ever going to flatter you in the city and make you look or feel good as a driver. So where does this snappy young starlet fit into the 90s hit parade? Well, if the 70s were anything to go by, the late 90s are putting even more emphasis on the word radical. And if radical's the word, then the focus has to be the car. Sure, we've all seen and heard of Ford's new Wildcard, and if initial reaction is anything to go by, then certainly Focus sings its song a lot louder than the Astra. Well, let's not forget that radical new ideas can take time to catch on. And in the meantime, don't be too surprised to see Vauxhall's Astra selling very well, thank you, against the opposition. And for my choice, well, Focus, Astra, radical new idea, conservative, play it safe. Well, why risk it? Actually, you know, I think I will risk it. Take it away.
Now, this is going to be a big year for Vauxhall. It has to be with the launch of the new Astra. General Motors chairman Jack Smith has already admitted that he's taken his eye off the ball in terms of the European market, so the Astra really is a crucial car for them. We got our first look at it about a year ago, and now we get a chance to see it in the flesh and to drive it here in Austria. And this is it. What do you think of it? I quite like the look of it. Maybe it looks like a mini Vectra, but it has a new chassis, new floor pan, new suspension and a new interior. It is an all-new car. Now on the outside, I like the design. All the panels seem to fit very well and quality has certainly been paramount in the making of this new car. It has a butch, slightly aggressive stance to it, but still unmistakably an Astra. It'll come in a choice of 3-door, a 5-door, there's an estate and a mini MPV a la the Renault Scenic. They're calling it the Zafira, should be with us in about a year's time.
There are 4 petrol engines, a 1.2, 1.4, a 1.6 and a 1.8, plus 2 diesels, a 1.7 and a 2 litre. And also to follow quite shortly will be 2 hot versions, one perhaps even carrying the Lotus badge, due respect to the work that Lotus engineers have put into the handling of the new Astra. Plus there'll be a cabriolet even further down the line. It wouldn't have taken much to make the Astra handle, ride and steer better, plus the ability to stop quickly rather than at its previous leisurely pace. Now the platform is totally new and will enable the Astra to come in a variety of body styles over the years to come. It has a hydroform aluminium subframe on which the front suspension is mounted, the coil springs, struts, dampers and anti-roll bar. Plus the body shell is 80% stiffer than before, which meant that the engineers could do away with a rear anti-roll bar.
So, the exterior of the new Astra we like, but step inside the cabin and the interior and be positively underwhelmed. Well, it's not quite as bad as all that. Some of the early reports on this car were positively scathing about the interior, but we're not so sure. It's not very inspiring, but everything is good and solid. All the switchgear seems to work well and feels good. The seats are comfortable, there's plenty of space. There's some rather garish seat designs, which I wouldn't choose, but you might want them. And also, maybe it's just lacking in that certain je ne sais quoi. It needs a bit of spice. So much time was spent on the exterior that maybe the interior was forgotten about. Now this new Astra drives and handles like what it is, a new car of course. This 1.8 that I'm driving at the moment is a very free revving car. You put your foot down and it goes quite quickly, goes very nicely, handles well. And General Motors went right back to the drawing board with a fresh piece of paper for this car. That meant a new chassis, new floor pan, revised engines and a new suspension as well, which was tuned in the end by their colleagues at Lotus, with particular preference made to the British style of roads, and certainly the new Astra handles and drives like no Vauxhall before. Now the market sector that the new Astra is in is surely one of the most competitive. There's the Peugeot 306, the Citroën Zara, and of course now VW's new Golf, there's the Escort and its replacement, the Focus. Now probably up until a few weeks ago, Vauxhall chiefs were very happy with the new Astra. That was until the Geneva Motor Show, when all that changed and Ford unveiled their new Focus and quite literally pulled the rug out from underneath its rivals. Vauxhall and VW chiefs were probably stood there quaking in their pinstripe suits and lederhosen as they looked at the radical new Focus, and it almost makes the new Golf and the new Astra look rather ordinary. So, have Vauxhall succeeded with the new Astra? Well, yes and no. On the negative side must be that cabin and the interior, and rumours are that a new cabin and interior are already being worked on and could be in the car in about a year or so's time. And like for like, say up against the Golf, the Astra's cabin is no match for it, and it's no cheap car either. They're very similarly priced. On the plus side though, you have to say the way it looks and the way it handles makes up for it. The engines are responsive, nimble and economical. So what do? Do you wait over a year for the new Focus? Do you wait a few months for the Golf, or do you buy an Astra now? Well, it's your money, it's your decision. Me, I think I'd maybe just hang on a little and see how things go. I'm sitting on the fence, I know, but make no mistake about it, this isn't a bad car. Now what we have here is the real fun part of driving the new Astra. Deep in the heart of Austria, Vauxhall have closed off an airfield for us and set up a special course to test out the dynamic capabilities of the Astra. There's a slalom course, there's a high-speed brake test, and there's of course the good old elk test that caught out the Mercedes A-Class so badly. Hopefully it won't do the same with the new Astra, I'm sure it won't. Let's go and try, shall we? So first of all, there's this slalom test. You've got to stay in the cones, of course, not knocking any of the cones off. I'm taking it rather gently just at the moment, just to get used to it, unlike the previous guy who took it very, very fast. Now we're into the slalom course, and this is in and out of these all the time, right the way through. And we're heading now towards the brake test. We've got to try and hit 100 kilometers an hour before stamping on the brakes at this particular point here. And it seems to do the job very nicely indeed. Down to the end, turning it round. Back up, there's a recommended speed of 60 kilometers an hour into this. This is the good old-fashioned elk test. Whoop. Took a few cones with me along the way there, I'm afraid. A lane change. And finally down to the last corner. Round we go, hard on the brakes in here. Taking it fairly gently back round to the end.
We've sold over 1.5 million Astras to date, and the car's never out of the top 10 bestsellers list. Now, this car represents a £1.5 billion investment, and we're very confident that it's going to become a #1 bestseller.
This must be the single most critical example I have ever seen of the impact colour has on a car's image. In other colours, fine, but in dark blue, well, in dark blue it looks kind of like a short wheelbase hearse. Seriously though, Vauxhall must be mad producing this car in this colour, because believe it or not, it's actually quite a handsome looking thing. It's just been dressed badly. It's the automotive equivalent of wardrobe putting Leonardo DiCaprio in a pair of grey polyester slacks, grey plastic shoes, armbands and a sou'wester. Not the best move on the styling front. After all, this is supposed to be a practical load-lugging estate. It's not some Ponzi shooting brake with a load-carrying ability of Tara Palmer, whatever her name is. But who wants to look this dull, even in a practical car? This is the business end then, and very sturdy it is too. Not that it would come as a surprise to anybody, really, that an Astra estate is good when it comes to earning its living. The load space itself is wide, easily accessible, fairly low loading height. The suspension doesn't intrude too much into the load space itself. It's actually got a payload of about 560 kilograms. That's as much as many a small van, so there's no problems there. And these plastic strips, they're more to do with helping loads slide in and out easily than ever they are to do with protecting the carpet. One thing though, and perhaps it's not a Vauxhall Astra specific thing, but load luggage covers. They're a great idea when it comes to avoiding placing too much temptation under the noses of the knuckle draggers who break into cars. They do keep things covered, but why are they always so, well, frankly awkward to get on with? Seems a shame when the rest of the car is so sturdy and practical that that should be so difficult to use, but I doubt you'd be wrestling with it for too long because I suspect it'd be broken inside of a couple of weeks. The previous Astra was, well, not very good. It looked boring, it drove badly, and the interior was tedious at best. That makes the new Astra even more of a revelation, which it had to be. It always seemed a shame that Vauxhall's lower-medium contender should, year by year, lose out more and more comprehensively to the competition. Therefore, Vauxhall had to work extra hard to make this new Astra improve in every way, the dynamics, the way the car looked. They had to address everything, and they have. Sadly, once again, this is really not the best example though. The interior itself as a design is clear, ergonomically efficient, everything's well laid out, it makes sense, but, well, it is drab. And look at this cloth. It's like the images they flashed up in front of Michael Caine as Harry Palmer in those Ipcris file films to brainwash him. Stare at these too long and I don't know what's going to happen. As for using the thing, the steering wheel itself, I know it's not a pretty thing by any means, but it is adjustable for reach and for rake, so it's easy to get a comfortable driving position in here. One of my complaints with the interior though is this seat. For anybody like me who's perhaps, well, a little bit under 6 foot, let's say, the lumbar support in the back of the seat is just a little bit too high up. For me, it's nearly up between my shoulder blades, which does get a little bit tiresome on a longer journey. Whilst the colour in this example is not a good choice, the engine definitely is. It's a 2-litre 16-valve diesel, first seen last year in the Vectra. Well, now for this, the new Astra. After a bit of initial noise on startup that will wake the neighbours in the morning, it really is an absolute stormer. Predictably for a diesel engine, it pulls very well from low revs. Where the surprise comes is later on in the rev range at about 3,000, just past halfway, when the car takes off and pulls almost as if there was a diesel. It's because of the 16 valves rather than 8, and it's a very welcome surprise. The handling as well has been tidied up for this new Astra. Revised suspension front and rear does keep everything pointing the right direction very well. It's actually gone from being a bit of a lethargic old bus into quite a pointable tool. The improvements are definitely most noticeable in this, the estate version. Overall, it's pretty competitively priced, though not outstandingly so. For this, the estate 2-litre 16-valve diesel version, LS, which is kind of mid-level trim, $15,195 on the road. That's with air conditioning. ABS, however, you get a standard on the CDX top level, but up until then, it'll set you back $695, inclusive of VAT. That's with passenger and side airbags as well. I wouldn't ordinarily bore you with this, but insurance. Yeah, I know, loads of tedious forms and loads of even more tedious people only too anxious to take all of your money off you. But for the Astra driver, insurance has long been particularly relevant. That's because the drooling car thieves have been particularly keen of taking these things away. That's pushed the premiums up over the years. Well, the good news, both for Vauxhall and the purchaser, is that for the new Astra, the insurance group ratings have been pushed down considerably. In some instances, we're talking as much as from 14 down to Group 7, and that is going to mean significant savings for a lot of Astra buyers. The new Astra estate, along with the rest of the new Astra range, is good news for Vauxhall. I'm sure a lot of executives spent sleepless nights wondering and worrying if they'd be stuck with another dog to sell, but they haven't been. The new car had to be practical, economical, rugged, and it is. The boot space is great, there's plenty of room in here, it can carry as much as a small van. The interior, okay, it's a bit gloomy, but it works, it makes sense ergonomically, and the exterior, well, if we excuse this colour, it's a handsome enough looking car. All in all, if Vauxhall had been stuck with another dog, it would have taken them a long time to claw back any credibility in this sector. As it is, it's a great car, and they're back in the midst of it with a great contender.
Probably the most striking aspect of the new Focus is, of course, its looks. It's a car that you either love or hate. There's very little middle ground, and personally, I like it. It blows the staid Astra and Golf out of the water with its style, which Ford call new edge design. It has a flowing form with crisp edges, sharp intersections and these taut lines, and of course these distinctive new headlights at the front. It's the rear of the car though that has caused most discussion, with many people feeling there's something not quite right. The flowing lines don't quite flow. The Focus is longer and wider than the Escort, and that's meant so much more room inside the cabin. Even rear seat passengers won't feel as cramped. On the downside though is perhaps the boot, which, whilst adequate, you'd think would quickly fill up whilst loading for a long summer holiday.
This really is a great car to drive, and everyone who's driven it will tell you much the same. Now, Ford claim that the Focus has class-leading ride, steering, stability, handling and refinement, and I, for one, I'm not going to argue with that. We've already seen how good the Puma and Cougar are, and the Focus just seems to continue that line and push the boundaries even further.
The Focus comes with a wide range of engines and body styles. Engines are 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 and 2-litre petrol, plus a new 1.8-litre Endura direct injection turbo diesel. Probably the most fun will be had in the 130 brake horsepower 2-litre 16-valve engine, which at the moment is the fastest and most powerful, 125 miles per hour and 0 to 60 in just over 9 seconds. Body styles, well, take your pick. 3-door, 5-door, 4-door and an estate, all with that distinctive new edge styling. Trim styles are varied too, CL, Z-Tech, LX and the top of the range gear versions.
So most importantly, you want to know how the new Focus drives. Is it a match for the benchmark Golf or the superb handling Astra? Well, yes, it definitely is. This model is the 1.6-litre Z-Tech SE engine, which produces 100 brake horsepower. 0 to 60 comes round in about 11.5 seconds onto a top speed of 115 miles per hour. Acceleration is swift, flicking fairly easily through the gearbox. There's a little notchiness going into third, and you can rev it easily round to about 6,000 RPM. It's a really refined and smooth engine.